New tonight, the president says that he could intervene in the extradition of Huawei CFO Meng Wanzhou if it would help cement a trade agreement with China. Yesterday, the Chinese telecom executive was released on $7.5 million bail by a Canadian court. I guess she has an ankle bracelet, so we know where she is. Joining me now from Washington is Fox Business Network's Edward Lawrence. So far as we know, Edward, she is still in Vancouver, right?
Yeah, David, exactly. And there's an area in which she's allowed to move within Vancouver. But yeah, she is in Vancouver and being monitored there. The president, though, is getting a lot of pushback for saying that he would step in the Huawei CFO arrest case if it meant a great trade deal. Now, Senator Richard Blumenthal says that makes it look like law enforcement is a tool for political ends or trade deals. Here's exactly what the president told Reuters yesterday. Now, if I think it's good for what will be certainly the largest trade deal ever made, which is a very important thing, what's good for national security, I would certainly intervene if I thought it was necessary. This left members of the president's own cabinet trying to walk a fine line, respecting the laws for this country and foreign policy.
We always have to balance American interests. Anytime there's a law enforcement engagement, we need to make sure we take foreign policy considerations into effect. It's totally appropriate to do so. The president's mission is very clear. It's America first.
And the Canadian court gave that Huawei CFO bail, as you said. Her next hearing is on February 6th, and the U.S. is trying to get her extradited for breaking the ban on sanctions with Iran. Now, among the evidence released in court, prosecutors say documents show that she made a presentation lying to HSBC Bank in London directly, saying her dealings with Iran met U.S. sanctioned guidelines. China has warned Canada to let Meng Wanzhou leave or face severe consequences. David?
All right, Edward, thank you very much. So great news for trade and investors, but is it right for the president to get involved in this situation to boost trade with China? Fox Business Network Susan Lee is here, along with National Taxpayers Union senior fellow Mattie Duppler and former Ohio State Senate Minority Leader Capri Cafaro. So, Susan, the president's throwing this chum out there, if you will, this bait.
Yes.
Are the Chinese taking the bait in terms of saying we'll go easy on Huawei if you give us a good trade deal?
I would say that China actually blinked today. And the markets moved because there was a Wall Street Journal report that they're going to alter their plans for Made in China 2025. I mean, this was their plan to basically cement their supremacy when it comes to manufacturing. They wanted to up industrial goods and only use Chinese products for 70% of everything that goes into computers and televisions, et cetera, et cetera. So I think, talking tough and bringing us to this point from the president has actually, I would say it's pretty much worked so far.
What about on Intel property, on intellectual property? I mean, that's really the key. They can make all the goals that they want, but when they start stealing our stuff, that's when we got to intervene. Is there any movement where they're going to crack down?
They've talked about intellectual property protection and stopping the forced transfer of technology as well, especially for foreign companies wanting to operate in China. But I would say at this point, since we've been in the WTO for 17 years for China, they've kind of stolen all the technology they need and want, from my perspective, after 17 years. So I think it might be easier for them to say, toe the line and say, okay, we'll stop the IP, we'll protect it.
All right, well, Capri, what about the costs that the president said he is willing to pay for some kind of trade deal? The cost in this sense might mean sort of trumping, if you will, with no pun intended, our judicial system for the sake of a deal. Is that worth it?
I personally think it sets a very bad precedent for the United States. I'm all for, getting creative and the art of the deal if it means that it's going to mean a robust economic outcome for the United States. But I don't think that sullying our criminal justice system and utilizing the Department of Justice essentially to negotiate with a foreign government is the right way to go. In addition to that, the fact that this woman has been charged with allegedly trying to circumvent Iranian trade sanctions and lying to HSBC. This Trump administration has really said they want to be strong against Iran. So, I think that this really sends some very difficult, bad signals to the international community, as well as the domestic audience, basically saying that we can use, the Department of Justice as a tool, which I just don't think is appropriate.
Mattie, what do you think?
I disagree with what Capri is saying. I do think it sends a message to the international community, but I think it sends the message that the Trump administration is exactly trying to articulate, and that's this. We are serious about Iran's sanctions. Remember, the reason that the Huawei official is in custody right now is not because of the U.S. and Chinese trade actions or because of all the allegations the United States has held against China. It's because of those Iran sanctions. The United States certainly is trying to set a signal, particularly to the member states in the EU who have also contemplated trying to flout those sanctions, that they mean business when it comes to those sanctions. But
so,
listen,
Mattie, forgive me for interrupting, but you're saying that just the arrest itself got the message through, and perhaps now we could be lenient if we need to be to get a trade deal.
I think that's up to the DOJ on what they want to do to be lenient when it comes to this arrest. When it comes to a trade deal, this is an opportunity for the administration to continue to emphasize the problems that they have said they have with China. Things that were mentioned before, like IP theft, forced tax transfers. Huawei, of course, is a massive company in China that has demonstrated some of these alleged behaviors before. The United States now has an opportunity to really have their moment in court to explain why that behavior is unacceptable on the national stage, and I hope that they're able to do that.
Well, Susan, even after Meng's arrest, Ms. Meng's arrest, we got some positive signals from China about the trade deal on a number of different fronts. Now we find out that what the president tweeted on the tariff, the car tariffs, was true, that they are willing to bring the 40% down to 15%.
But it's an easy ask and it's an easy request for China to adhere to, because they already brought it down to 15%. It was 25, brought it down to 15, went back up to 40% after President Trump raised tariffs on Chinese-made goods.
But that was scaring car that 40%. It's true. It was recent. It was in reaction to our tariffs, but it was scaring the hell out of those car companies.
Not just scary. I mean, it was actually killing sales in China.
Right.
Tesla sold only 200 cars, and it was like, I think their sales plummeted 80% or something on the year.
So my question is, since the Chinese, after Ms. Meng's arrest, were dealing with us, were helping us on the trade front, do they care that much about her arrest?
Of course they do, and it's not just trade. I mean,
but we're dealing with each other
as well. Don't forget, right? It's also about their national security.
And there was an arrest of I believe a Canadian business person
and
as well.
apparently a second one in questioning as well, right, Capri, as you were mentioning?
Yeah, there's Canadian officials now that have been detained in China, which presumably is a result of this potential extradition and the detainment of this Chinese citizen in Canada.
So Capri, because of that, because of this stuff is ongoing, isn't it time to kind of soothe it a little by what the president is saying? I mean, maybe you have objections to putting trade relations over the judicial system, but at the same time, we don't want a tit-for-tat thing going on with China where our business people are being arrested there, their business people are being arrested here and elsewhere.
Look, I mean, we are dealing with a totalitarian regime. Let's not forget that. I mean, China does not have a stellar record on human rights, for example. I mean, I think that they are flexing here. We have to do what we have to do. And, as was said earlier, I mean, if we are serious about, enforcing and sending a message in regards to Iran sanctions, then we did the right thing. The Department of Justice did the right thing by asking the Canadian officials to detain this woman going through Vancouver. So, this is unfortunately, high-stakes poker when it comes to international diplomacy and international law. And, maybe there'll be some impact on the trade negotiations. But even if the trade negotiations weren't happening at all, I think we'd still be in this situation with a tit for tat with, the Chinese detaining people from the West.
Well, Mattie, just on the issue of trade right now, it does seem like we have kind of pushed through a barrier this week that we were unable to get over before. And the market is certainly responding.
Yeah, I think now because we are on that 90-day timeline, any news is good news, and that's certainly what we're seeing in the market response. I still have questions. The idea of the car tariffs coming down. Of course, if car tariffs come down from 40 to 15%, they're simply coming back down to the level that they started at before we put our last tranche of Chinese tariffs into effect. So I would like to see China come forward with a lot more than that if we're actually going to get a deal here at the end of these 90 days.
Well, hopefully it's zero on both sides.
Right.
Stuff coming
zero
in
is
and
the
stuff
right
going
amount,
out.
David. You're exactly right.
Well, that's what the president says he wants.
World.
Mattie, Capri, and Susan, good to see you all. Thank you very much for being here. Coming up, a federal judge sentencing President Trump's former lawyer, Michael Cohen, to 3 years behind bars for tax fraud, campaign finance violations, and lying But as Trump's current lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, notes, nothing that ties back to Russia collusion. So is the president right when he says the Mueller probe is nothing but a witch hunt? We are on that.